Almost nobody knows these places exist, yet small communities have lived here for generations. These are settlements so remote that the nearest neighbor is hundreds or thousands of kilometers away. Places where the mail arrives by boat once a year, where the internet is satellite only, and where medical emergencies require days of travel to reach help. These communities persist, not because life is easy, but because the people who live there have roots deeper than the difficulties. Because isolation creates bonds that connection to the wider world cannot replicate. What defines isolation is not just distance, but accessibility, with remoteness being measured in travel time rather than kilometers. Subscribe to Globeluck's journey and discover the 25 most isolated inhabited places on Earth. The volcanic island is the most remote inhabited place on Earth. Situated in the South Atlantic Ocean, over 2,400 kilometers from the nearest continental land in South Africa. The island contains 245 permanent residents living in Edinburgh of the Seven Seas, with the population descended from British sailors, American whalers, and shipwreck survivors. The island is accessible only by boat, with the journey from Cape Town taking 5 to 6 days on fishing vessels that arrive approximately 10 times per year. The island has no airport and no harbor deep enough for large ships. The economy is based on fishing, particularly rock lobster. The island was evacuated in 1961 when the volcano erupted, and the entire population relocated to England for 2 years. But most returned, despite having experienced modern conveniences. The settlement on the eastern coast of Greenland contains approximately 350 people living in one of the most isolated communities in the Arctic. Accessible by helicopter from Iceland once or twice per week, depending on weather. The settlement is surrounded by the Northeast Greenland National Park, the world's largest national park, covering over 900,000 square kilometers, where polar bears outnumber humans. The temperature drops below -40 degrees Celsius during winter, with the sea ice extending for hundreds of kilometers. The winter darkness lasts 4 months, with the sun never rising above the horizon. The economy is based on hunting polar bears, seals, and whales, with traditional Inuit practices continuing. Serious medical emergencies require evacuation by helicopter to Iceland, over 1,000 kilometers away. The island is the least populated national jurisdiction on Earth, with approximately 50 permanent residents, most of whom are descendants of the Bounty mutineers who settled in 1790 after seizing the ship and fleeing British justice. The island is located in the South Pacific, over 2,000 kilometers from Tahiti and 5,000 kilometers from New Zealand. The island is accessible by boat from Mangareva in French Polynesia, with the journey taking 32 hours, though ships arrive only a few times per month. The island has no airport and no harbor. Ships anchor offshore, and passengers are transferred by longboat through the surf. The population has declined from over 200 in the 1930s to 50 due to emigration. The economy is based on selling stamps, honey, and handicrafts. The village at the bottom of the Grand Canyon is home to the Havasupai tribe and is the most remote community in the contiguous United States. Accessible only by helicopter, by hiking 13 kilometers down the canyon, or by mule. The village contains approximately 200 permanent residents who live without road access in a settlement where the mail is still delivered by mule, making Supai the last place in the United States where the Postal Service uses pack animals. The isolation is chosen rather than imposed, with the tribe maintaining control over access to protect the waterfalls and turquoise pools. The village has a school, a health clinic, a lodge, and a store. The economy is based on tourism to Havasu Falls, with revenue supporting the community while isolation preserves traditional culture. The settlement on the northern tip of Ellesmere Island is the northernmost permanently inhabited place on Earth at 82 degrees north latitude, only 817 kilometers from the North Pole. The settlement contains approximately 60 military and scientific personnel who rotate through on temporary postings to operate the weather station and military intelligence facility. The winter darkness lasts 4 months from October to February, with temperatures dropping below -40 degrees regularly. The summer brings continuous daylight for 4 months from April to August. Though temperature rarely exceeds 10 degrees, supplies arrive by military aircraft year-round. The base was established in 1950 and has operated continuously, providing climate data from one of Earth's most extreme environments and maintaining Canadian Arctic sovereignty. The town at 78 degrees north latitude is the world's northernmost settlement, with a permanent civilian population exceeding 1,000 people. The town contains approximately 2,400 residents living in an Arctic environment where polar bears outnumber humans across the archipelago. The winter darkness lasts from late October to mid-February, with the polar night creating conditions where the sun never rises for 4 months. The summer brings midnight sun from late April to late August with continuous daylight. The economy is based on coal mining, tourism, and research, with the university center attracting students studying Arctic environments. The town is notable for the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, a backup storage facility containing seeds from around the world. The town prohibits death, with the terminally ill being sent to the mainland because permafrost prevents decomposition. The village in Siberia holds the record for the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth, with the temperature dropping to minus 67.7 degrees Celsius in 1933 and regularly reaching minus 50 during winter. The village contains approximately 500 people living in a location where the ground is permanently frozen. The winter brings darkness for 21 hours per day, with only 3 hours of twilight around noon. And summer brings nearly constant daylight and temperatures reaching 30 degrees, creating a temperature range exceeding 90 degrees between the coldest and warmest days. The economy is based on reindeer herding, ice fishing, and tourism, as the village markets itself as the pole of cold. The village is accessible by road from Yakutsk, approximately 900 kilometers west, though the journey takes 2 days. The town on the western coast of Greenland contains approximately 4,600 residents, living adjacent to the Ilulissat Isfjord, a UNESCO World Heritage Site where the Cermek Kujalek Glacier carves icebergs into Disco Bay. The town is accessible by air from Copenhagen or Reykjavik, with flights operating year-round, though weather often causes delays. The economy is based on fishing, tourism, and government services, with the halibut fishery being particularly important. The town experiences midnight sun from late May to late July and polar night in December and January. The ice fjord produces massive icebergs that drift south and occasionally reach as far as the shipping lanes off Newfoundland. The town is isolated by Greenland standards, being accessible only by air or sea, with no roads connecting it to other settlements, demonstrating that isolation is relative. The town in the South Australian outback contains approximately 1,700 residents living in a desert where summer temperatures exceed 50 degrees Celsius regularly, making it one of the hottest inhabited places on Earth. The town is famous for opal mining, with over 70% of the world's opal being extracted from the surrounding desert. Many residents live in underground dugouts carved into the rock to escape the heat, with entire homes including bedrooms, living rooms, and even churches being built below ground where the temperature remains constant around 23 degrees year-round. The town is located 850 kilometers northwest of Adelaide on the Stuart Highway, crossing Australia from south to north. The isolation and the harsh environment create a frontier atmosphere, where the population is transient, with miners arriving, seeking fortune, and leaving when the claim runs out or the heat becomes unbearable. The capital of Nunavut contains approximately 7,800 residents, making it Canada's smallest territorial or provincial capital despite being the largest community in Nunavut. The city is accessible only by air, with no roads connecting it to southern Canada. Flights from Ottawa take approximately 3 hours. The city serves as the administrative center for Nunavut and the transportation hub for the Eastern Arctic, with flights connecting to smaller communities across the territory. The winter temperature drops below -30 degrees regularly, with the polar night creating 24-hour darkness in December. The summer brings midnight sun and temperatures occasionally reaching 20 degrees. The cost of living is extremely high, with food and goods being flown in year-round, and making Iqaluit one of Canada's most expensive cities to live in, despite the modest infrastructure and limited services compared to southern cities. The island in the southeastern Pacific Ocean is famous for the Moai statues created by the Rapa Nui people. With the island being one of the most remote inhabited places on Earth, located over 3,700 kilometers from continental Chile. The island contains approximately 7,800 residents living on an island that is approximately 24 kilometers long and 12 kilometers wide. The island is accessible by flight from Santiago, Chile, and taking approximately 5 hours, or from Tahiti, taking approximately 5 hours in the opposite direction. The island's remoteness led to ecological collapse when the Rapa Nui deforested the island to move the Moai statues, causing soil erosion and the extinction of the palm forests that once covered the island. The economy is based on tourism, with visitors coming to see the Moai and the archaeological sites. The island represents isolation at its most extreme, with the nearest inhabited land being Pitcairn Island over 2,000 kilometers away. The city on the northern coast of Alaska is the northernmost city in the United States at 71 degrees north latitude, where the polar night lasts 65 days from mid-November to mid-January, and the midnight sun lasts 82 days from mid-May to early August. The city contains approximately 4,400 residents, primarily Inupiat people who have inhabited the region for over 1,500 years. The city is accessible by air year-round from Anchorage or Fairbanks, with flights taking approximately 90 minutes. The temperature rarely exceeds 10 degrees even in summer, with the average annual temperature being -11 degrees Celsius. The economy is based on oil industry, support services, government employment, and subsistence hunting of bowhead whales, seals, and caribou. The city's remoteness and the cost of living make it one of the most expensive places to live in the United States, with food and goods being flown in, creating prices double or triple what they would be in southern Alaska. The settlement on the Kara Sea in the Russian Arctic contains fewer than 600 residents, making it one of Russia's northernmost and smallest settlements. despite being a port that serves as a base for Arctic shipping and scientific research. The settlement is located on a peninsula where the winter temperature drops below -40 degrees and where the polar night lasts approximately 3 months from November to February. The settlement was established in 1915 as a radio station and expanded during the Soviet era when it served as a base for Arctic convoys and scientific expeditions. The population has declined from over 5,000 during the Soviet period to fewer than 600 today, as the economic collapse and the harsh conditions drove people to move to southern regions. The settlement is accessible by air or by sea during the brief summer season when the ice retreats enough to allow navigation. And the isolation and the declining population raise questions about the settlement's viability. The hamlet on the southern tip of Ellesmere Island is Canada's northernmost civilian settlement at 76 degrees north latitude, containing approximately 130 residents, primarily Inuit, who were relocated there by the Canadian government in the 1950s to assert sovereignty in the high Arctic. The relocation was controversial, with the families being moved from northern Quebec over 2,000 kilometers to an environment they were unfamiliar with, where the hunting was different and the isolation was extreme. The hamlet experiences polar night from late October to mid-February and midnight sun from early April to late August. The temperature rarely exceeds 10 degrees even in summer, with the average annual temperature being -16 degrees. The hamlet is accessible by air from Resolute Bay, with flights being irregular and weather-dependent. The economy is based on hunting, government employment, and limited tourism, with visitors coming to experience the high Arctic environment and traditional Inuit culture. The archipelago in the southern Indian Ocean contains no permanent civilian population, but houses approximately 45 to 100 scientists and support staff who rotate through on temporary postings to operate the research station and the satellite tracking facility. The islands are located over 3,300 kilometers from Madagascar and over 4,500 kilometers from Australia, making them among the most isolated islands on Earth. The islands are accessed by ship 4 times per year from Réunion Island, with the journey taking 5 to 6 days across the Southern Ocean. The climate is subantarctic, with strong winds, frequent precipitation, and temperatures ranging from -10 to +15 degrees Celsius year-round. The islands contain no trees, with the vegetation being limited to grasses, mosses, and the introduced Kerguelen cabbage. The islands were discovered in 1772 and have never supported a permanent human population, though they have hosted scientific research since the 1950s. The island in the Arabian Sea contains approximately 60,000 residents living in a location isolated by geography and by Yemen's political instability, which has made travel to the island extremely difficult in recent years. The island is located 380 kilometers south of the Arabian Peninsula and is famous for its unique biodiversity, with over 1/3 of plant species being endemic. The island was relatively accessible until Yemen's civil war began in 2015, with the conflict making commercial flights irregular and the security situation requiring careful assessment before visiting. The island's economy is based on fishing, livestock, and date cultivation, with tourism having grown before the conflict disrupted access. The island's isolation has preserved traditional culture and language, with the Socotra language being distinct from Arabic and related to ancient South Arabian languages. The island represents isolation created by politics rather than only by geography, with the conflict making an already remote island nearly inaccessible despite being inhabited by a substantial population. The island's indigenous name reflects the culture that created the Moai statues and that persists despite the ecological collapse and the slave raids that reduced the population from an estimated 15,000 at peak to approximately 111 in 1877. The island's modern population of approximately 7,800 includes descendants of the original Rapa Nui and Chilean settlers, with the culture being a blend of Polynesian traditions and Chilean influences. The island's remoteness created conditions where the civilization developed in isolation from other Polynesian islands, despite being settled by voyagers who crossed over 3,000 kilometers of open ocean to reach it. The deforestation that allowed the Moai to be moved using palm logs destroyed the island's ecology and eliminated the ability to build sea-going canoes, trapping the population on an island that could no longer support them at previous population levels. Yes, the island's history demonstrates the consequences of isolation when resource management fails and when there is no possibility of migration to relieve population pressure. Why people continue to live in the world's most remote settlements becomes understandable when you consider that isolation creates communities where bonds are stronger because survival depends on cooperation, where identity is tied to place in ways that urban mobility cannot replicate, and where leaving would mean not just moving, but abandoning a way of life that defines who you are. The challenges are real, with isolation creating difficulties that range from medical emergencies requiring days of evacuation to the cost of supplies being multiples of what they would be in accessible locations. Yet the rewards for those who remain include landscapes of extraordinary beauty, night skies unpolluted by artificial light, and the satisfaction of maintaining presence in places where human habitation tests the limits of what our species can endure. Subscribe to Globe Luck's Journey for more explorations of Earth's most remote corners, where communities persist despite geography that would defeat most people's tolerance for solitude, where isolation is both challenge and reward, and where human resilience demonstrates that we can live almost anywhere if the reasons are strong enough.